I think it's cliche, but it's very valid, and that is, in China you have to build relationships. It's very, very important to spend time on the ground for senior executives of a firm to be on the ground and to get to know who their business partners might be. Whether you do things in the form of a joint venture or a standalone enterprise, WOFE as they call wholly owned foreign enterprise, that will depend on a lot of considerations you have to make for yourself. So there's no one size fits all approach, but one thing's for sure, you need to be there, spend time and build relationships before making decisions. Second point I'd make is think about the areas beyond Beijing and Shanghai and Guangzhou. China's economic development is now spread right across the country, the far northeast to the south west, and there are many, many examples of Australians doing good business in far-flung parts of China where people have never heard of. These are population centres sometimes of several million people and often quite a substantial market. So there's no one size fits all, there's no standard template, but it's very much about being there, spending time, building relationships and putting effort into understanding how it is that your business partners think and how they approach their work. The Chinese were very quick, Chinese government leaders very quick to express their sympathy and condolences, to offer help and assistance. These are two countries that share a common geological instability. The Japanese provided a lot of support in 2008, May of 2008, when China experienced the massive Wenchuan earthquake and something like 90,000 people died. There's no question that they have a common shared understanding of how threatening and challenging nature can be, and they have a lot of technical skills that they can share and trained personnel and experience in responding to these sorts of catastrophes. So China-Japan relations will always be challenging for both sides, but we need to be careful not to be too concerned or too focused on at times when there are rising tensions, because at other times the relationship is conducted in a normal way. The important thing to bear in mind, though, is the extent to which both countries are heavily economically integrated, and the amount of Japanese business that's done in China is enormous. So there's a very, very solid economic base. So whatever the historical differences may have been, there is a foundation that's rock solid in terms of economic interest. It's a very good question. There's no doubt that whether it's a specific case of Gmail or some other case, that the Chinese government is very actively involved in monitoring the internet and restricting what their citizens can have access to. But that has to be put against the incredible interest in China and the extent to which China is today much more open than it's ever been before. And the internet is amazing. I mean, 420 million registered internet users, most are aged between 16 and 40 years of age. And the Chinese government, as an authoritarian one-party system, is now very, very focused on public opinion and very responsive and sensitive to public opinion. And it's learning, like governments in Western, more democratic systems have learned how you lead and manage and shape public opinion to get certain policy outcomes. So this is a very interesting transitionary period, but I don't think it will dampen people's interest in China simply because what's going on is of a scale that we've never really seen before. Obviously the mining and energy, and don't forget energy, this is very, very big now in Australia-China relations, dominates people's thinking in China about us. It has to, because we're a major supplier of the vital raw materials that they need for their industrialisation. We are now China's 7th largest trading partner, and there are many, many provinces in China where Australia is the biggest single trading partner of those provinces. And some of these provinces have populations the size of whole European countries. So it's understandable that there is this view of Australia. I think there's a very high recognition of Australia's other attributes and other things we can bring to the relationship. As I mentioned, we have a very big number of Chinese students enrolled in secondary and post-secondary education. We're getting close to 500,000 Chinese tourists a year. Chinese tourists, by the way, are the single biggest spending per capita tourists of all the visitors to Australia now. This demonstrates that there's much more to the relationship than resources and energy, no matter how important those things are. Going though to your question, I think what I try and help people in Australia understand is that the world's changing very rapidly with respect to China, and the whole world is onto it. The whole world understands that there's a big game and they need to be part of it. And so, whereas once we had a very strong presence relative to other countries, we did more in China relative to other countries, much bigger diplomatic presence relative to most other countries, not the United States, of course, or Japan, where the engagement of our universities, everything was ahead of the pack because of our historical relationship with China, early recognition in 1972, strong complementarities underpinning ever closer people-to-people contacts, no major historical animosities. We were really ahead of the pack, but that has changed. And it's not that we're doing maybe less than what we did before, it's just the rest of the world is doing so much more. And we need to be conscious that it's a highly competitive environment in Beijing and elsewhere in China for access, to do business, to have influence. It's not like it was for Australia, and I think this has changed fundamentally in the last 4 years or so that I've been in China. In that context, it's therefore important that we don't lose sight of cultural programs. We've had a year of Australian culture in China. Next year we're coming up to a year of Chinese culture in Australia. I instigated and initiated an annual Writers' Week in Beijing, which has become very successful. We've had 4 Writers' Weeks, and it includes a Publishers' Forum, which has become a fixture on the annual Publishers' calendar of Australia. This is very important. Again, China is so rich and powerful now that if it thinks that we are an imitation of someone else, or we're just an echo of another culture or society, then they won't bother with us. They'll go to the source. They don't have to spend time with the monkey when they can go to the organ grinder. So this is what's changed as well. And I just hope that people in Australia understand that this is of great importance to us, this relationship, great importance to our living standards and our capacity to employ people in Australia. But it means and requires a very big commitment to ensure that China understands who we are, that we speak with our own voice, we have our own mind, and that we can bring something to the relationship that's uniquely Australian.